Hi, I'm Brittney Ashley, your host of Breaking Norms, Building Dreams, your guide through this transformative journey in both business and life. This is your place crafted for dreamers, doers, or anyone who has been told they can't. Get ready as we challenge those narratives together. You're tuning in live to the United Public Radio Network, airing on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are streaming on all the popular platforms every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me for a candid and thought-provoking conversation celebrating your unique journey because you are worth it. Hello, everyone. We made it. It's Monday again. Can't believe we're on Monday. I feel like we're on a run that I'm finally doing some live shows with all of you. So I'm so excited to have Vanessa on today. So excited to have you and dig into what you do. But before we dig in, welcome to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. I'm your host, Brittney Ashley, and we are live on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 and 107.7 in New Orleans. Get ready to escape the next hour as we break norms and build dreams today with Vanessa. Vanessa, I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
You have many talents, as I know, because I know you personally, but I'll do a little short bio on Vanessa so all our listeners and viewers can get to know you a bit more. Vanessa is a fundraising consultant and email fundraising copywriter at the Storytelling Nonprofit. A digital fundraising veteran, Vanessa has helped clients raise millions of dollars and build robust email programs. Her clients have included BC Women's Health Foundation's Win Without War, Variety BC, and Burnaby Hospital Foundation. Vanessa is also an author of the Storytelling Nonprofit, a practical guide to telling stories that raise money and awareness. And Vanessa has been recognized for her professional achievements through AFP's Giving Hearts Awards and BC Business 30 Under 30 lists. So many great things. I'm so excited to have you today, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you.
I didn't know that you won 30 Under 30, by the way. Congrats.
Thank you. To be honest, that was a little while ago because I'm no longer under 30.
I didn't know that. It's a big achievement. So congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Congrats. Maybe you can tell some of the listeners a little bit how you started your journey.
Yeah, it's been a while. I feel very fortunate to have hit the self-employment milestone of 13 years this year, which feels like a big deal to me to have made it this far. I first started out, and I have always been in the nonprofit sector doing fundraising. I mostly work in like direct response fundraising and direct mail, and email is more my background. And I kind of got into consulting in 2012. I, at the time, was like looking for a new job, and I just didn't find exactly what I was looking for at the right organization. I really wanted to focus on copywriting and specifically digital, and I just couldn't find it in Vancouver. And so I started doing some freelance work around that time that led to more and more work, and very fortunately landed me in the position that I am today.
Love that. It's been a journey, but a great journey.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because non-for-profit is niche. So maybe what kind of, because you can go in any kind of direction with what you're doing. So why did you pick, I'm curious to know why you picked non-for-profit.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions too about having nonprofits as clients. I think a lot of people think like, oh, there's no money to be made there. Like nonprofits don't have money, which is not true. They do. They hire consultants. They spend money on services. They work with lots of vendors. So it is a really robust sector with a lot of business opportunities if you are a for-profit company or a consultant that wants to work with them. For me, it was just where I had come from. My background was working in-house at nonprofits. I worked at the University of British Columbia in development and alumni engagement for a few years. And then after that at Union Gospel Mission in Vancouver. And there was something about working for nonprofits that was just really values aligned for me. It was a place that I felt really called to be. I loved giving back to the community. I loved, and I still love, putting my work and my skills to really good use to help clients achieve what they want to achieve in the world and help other people and make the world a better place. And so for me, it always felt like a natural place to just like continue to stay here and a really good use of my time and my skills.
No, I love that so much. And to be honest, like even too, when I was along my journey, I was like, oh, non-for-profits. But I think non-for-profits sometimes have a little bit, not of a bad name, but like thinking that there's no money in there for people to actually access, which is not the case
Yeah.
at all. We work for a lot non-for-profits as well, doing different
Yeah,
services.
I think, well, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of nonprofits, think of like really small local organizations who probably have budgets somewhere between like 500,000 and maybe $1.5 million, which is pretty small for a nonprofit or a business.
Mhm.
But there are quite a few other types of nonprofits. If you look at like other verticals or niches of nonprofits, like hospital foundations, universities, regional size organizations. So there's like quite a diversity in terms of like the profiles of nonprofits that are out there.
Yeah, and I find I personally wish I would have known a bit more about non-for-profits because I do love giving back in different ways in the organization, and, um, I think when I first started, I think I was just a little bit, like, closed-minded. So maybe you can educate people on, like, not being so closed-minded. I'm not closed-minded now because I'm like, "Oh, I can learn all these other things that they can do," but,
Mhm.
uh, that mind shift, is there any kind of tips that you can give anybody that
Yeah. I mean, I think some of this will apply to anybody, whether or not you want to work in the nonprofit space or you want to work with someone else. I mean, I think part of what's helped me build the sustainable business and be around this long is because I'm really open to different opportunities and evolving with where the market is going. Like
Mhm.
I can say like very confidently that my business looks very different now than it did in
Mm.
2015, and it looks really different than it did even in 2018, 2019. And that's because, like, my offerings have changed in regards to, like, what the market is asking for, and my business model has shifted with that as well. Like, I don't think I could have continued what I was doing when I started, for instance, in, like, 2012 or 2013 and, like,
Yeah.
still had the same level of success in the kind of type of business that I have now. And I think it's really useful to think about, like, if you've been around a while in a business or you're planning to be, like, the business and the market mature over time, and
Mhm.
being able to shift with what you see customers needing or like other trends in the industry or market vertical that you're in.
Mhm.
It's really great to be able to respond to those in real time and be open to, okay, here's how like other ways that my skills are applicable, other things that I can do with what I know how to do in this industry.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something I've been really good at pivoting with over the years.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing. And something to be mindful of if for anybody listening out there that does have a business, it doesn't matter even if it's a non-for-profit, is always just kind of looking at the market and how it's changing and how it's progressing. Look at Sears, for example. Used to be so big back in the day, and they're like only like relied on catalog, and that's kind of right when things started trending a little bit more online or having that accessibility.
Mhm.
And they're like, "No, I don't wanna move, I don't wanna change," and look, they're no longer in business. So as a business as a whole, we always have to look at the market and ask curious
Mhm.
questions from others of what they could do and potentially, like, add on to their business. But now that you've been doing this for 13 years, do you have any, what kinda has come up along the ways that maybe have been a lot of struggles for you?
Oh, what a good question. I mean, I think probably like anybody else, like my business has high and low seasons, right? That like are largely out of my control. And in some ways, because I work in fundraising, when fundraising and philanthropy is really good for nonprofits, when donors are giving a lot of money, nonprofits are happy to pay for contracts. They're happy to pay vendors. They're
Mhm.
willing to spend the money and invest in themselves and invest in services for the organization. But when we go through recessions, when we go through economic contractions, those are often like the first things to go when people tighten those purse strings.
Mhm.
And so I certainly would say like I'm not immune to that. But I think the thing that I've learned being around this long has been that like these things are all cyclical. And I think
Mhm.
I've learned, especially in the last like couple of years, to not freak out about it as much as I probably used to 10 years ago. And to
Yeah.
know that like the cycle will end at some point, like the work returns. And part of what I can do in the interim when things are good is to like plan for that next cycle to, have a financial plan or like a business plan that accounts for those times when inevitably like things do slow down. Like that's just kind of the
Mhm.
reality. It's never always like at that high demanding level all the time.
100%.
Um, yeah. And that's like not something I would have known 10 years ago or 13 years ago going into this. That was certainly something that I've had to learn over the years.
Yeah, and like I said, I always say this, that Rome wasn't built in a day. So there's so many
Mhm.
business, social media and the nut of it. It shows like the pretty picture, but it doesn't show like what we have learned along the years that we've been doing
Mhm.
this. Like I'm coming in my 6th year. I'm in my 6th year. And I know that like the mind shifts for me, like if I don't land that client or something doesn't go my way or something like I moved this business on the prime of COVID, uh, which
Yeah.
was like a learning curve in itself. So kind of rolling with the punches and also learning to, if that one person doesn't say yes right away, of like that mind
Mhm.
shift of, oh, I didn't get that, but instead of dwelling on it, what can you learn from it? And then what can you do differently and or move your needle in a different direction? I know,
Mhm.
I know you and I chatted briefly, but I know you've been going through some health challenges maybe that you want to share with our listeners and how you were able to navigate that and still navigating
Yeah.
it.
I'm not sure I'm like navigating them as much these days, but yeah, they've definitely been a part of, I would say, like inextricably like my business life and
Mhm.
my business journey over the years. I would say probably by far the most difficult one I encountered was in 2016. I had a concussion that lasted for about 10 months. So, like a pretty significant one. Usually they go away and resolve within a month or so for most people. But I, certainly didn't wake up that day thinking I was going to trip on the sidewalk and fall like literally on my face hard enough to have a minor brain injury.
Yeah.
But it was a really challenging time for me, for a lot of reasons. I think both the physical recovery of a concussion is really challenging, but also the emotional recovery of like the trauma aspect of it was particularly difficult for me. I think that part of what I, and not at the time, but in years since and like reflecting on, especially probably like in the couple years right after that, thought about a lot was that part of a lot of, I think, the emotional suffering that I had during that time
Mhm.
and trying to like heal and feel better and just like move on with my life from that was that, oh, my identity was like so tied up in my business that
Mhm.
when I couldn't work, I just had no sense of like self-worth or idea of who I was without doing the work that I was doing and getting the kind of like constant feedback that I got from clients and customers. And I think I knew that in some ways before my accident, that like I was very much about like the business and my business was me and all of that. But when I was like 2 weeks into my concussion and suddenly was having trouble with like vocabulary recall and couldn't remember words for things, as a writer,
Mhm.
that was like really confronting for me to wonder like, was I going to be able to return to writing at the level that I can, to raise a lot of money for my clients? Or was I permanently going to have challenges with things
Yeah.
like that, and not being able to work and having to confront that? I mean, it was incredibly difficult.
Mhm.
Um, I think though, like coming out of that experience for me, I think it's given me a healthy emotional distance from the business in some ways that have allowed me to feel like a person separately from this thing that I do, during the day, during the week. And I think that I hesitate to call it like the gift of the experience, but it does feel like maybe something positive that came out of that experience for me was feeling like, I could be separate from my business and my identity as a business owner, and I could understand other parts of myself and value other parts of myself as much, if not more, than I do as like me, the business owner and the person who makes money.
Yeah.
And, that was a challenging, like, confrontation with my identity to go through on top of like a physical recovery from an accident like that. But I think it's really helped me over the years, when I have gone through challenges in my business, whether business is slow or maybe we've lost a client or something like that, to not personalize it as much. Like I feel like I have a little bit of emotional insulation
Yeah.
from some of those other types of setbacks that I have in the business because it doesn't feel like I live and die by what's happening day to day in the
Mm.
business anymore like I did before then.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more on maybe some tweaks that you've made in your business that kind of made you adapt or not?
Yeah. I think for me that, coming out of that, I really realized that, if I wanted to be like more of a company of one, which I am kind of like a smaller business, I don't really have huge aspirations of having a major agency with like 100 employees or
Mhm.
something. I really had to have better systems and process for everything so that if I did have an assistant or a coordinator or somebody else who was working with me, there could be things that could carry on without me in the background, which was always really helpful. I think that time also too, so it was the summer of 2016, I'd had a really successful course launch that summer, and I felt really grateful for having figured out how to like productize some of my knowledge into courses because that allowed me to keep making money while I was taking time off. At the time, I didn't have disability insurance. So
Mhm.
being able to like continue to make some amount of money from my knowledge and my experience over the years without having to like physically show up somewhere to do training or to consult with a client was really, really great. And I think that's something that like I continue to try to diversify my business and not make it so like client service
Mm,
focused in terms
yeah.
of the diversity.
Yeah. So it sounds like you made evergreen content. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you created
Yeah.
some videos and like what
Mhm.
program did you use for anyone listening who's like, oh, maybe I should do that?
Oh, what a good question. I feel like I use one that nobody uses these days. I don't use Teachable or anything like that. It's a really old course platform, but I like it a lot. It's called Rizuku, and
Yeah, I've
I've
heard
been
of that
I've been using that since 2014. I really like it a lot. So I haven't moved my courses from there in
one.
over a decade.
Well, if it's working, there's no need to move it. There's so many
Yeah.
course programs, and I love that you're doing things on the evergreen process
Mhm.
because we have so much knowledge that we can give to the world. Not everyone, I like to say, no one can read your brain. And I love that you did SOPs and all, like that's what I always say to all the clients of like, okay, if we need to bring somebody into your business, how can we make the business so it can always run when you're not
Mhm.
there? Um, we took over a client not too long ago and they worked with another VA organization and they kept everything on their end.
Hmm.
Actually, all their project management systems, all their things, and the SOPs. And so I had to come in and be like, well, no, we need it all in your systems, your ideas should be all over here stored on your end. So if anything ever happens, and this is like I'm trying to educate everyone who's listening or seeing us right now, because this is kind of like a rule of thumb that for any business owner, if it's your business, you should be inviting people to your stuff and be able to give like remove them, nix them if they feel like they're not in
Sure.
alignment to your business. Just a nice business model in essence. But I love that you've
Mhm.
done that. And from that experience of creating courses, do you have any kind of tips for anybody listening?
Um, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of misconceptions like in the course creation space that it's just like easy passive income. And I will be the first to tell you that there is no such thing as like easy passive income in some ways. It always takes some effort and some work to sell these things. But that said, like, something that I spent time documenting and building in 2015 has since made me like $100,000 in a product, which has been great. Like that's not a small amount of money in my business. And it's the same thing for the book that I wrote in 20 published in
Mhm.
2016. You know, putting those things down and kind of creating products, creating knowledge-based products has paid a lot of dividends for the business. I certainly wouldn't say it was like my full-time salary by any means, but it's nice to have that additional money that's coming in.
Mhm.
And so I would say in terms of creating like tips for like creating when thinking about what you're creating, I found that for me, like the courses that have been more successful have been ones that have been focused on solving a really specific problem. I
Mhm.
work in fundraising, and so there's lots of ways to fundraise, lots of things organizations can do to fundraise. And so if I was teaching like a generalist program on like how to fundraise, that would probably be too broad. And I don't think that that would be as successful. Whereas like I have really dug down into a lot of my work on copywriting and storytelling and fundraising. And that's been something that people want to learn. They want to learn how to write better so they can send better direct mail appeals or better fundraising emails to raise more money. And I think like really being able to say, like, here is the specific skill that you'll learn in this class and sort of the transformation of, you know, maybe you're not a great writer now, but you will know how to write a really good appeal because here's the
Mhm.
things you're going to learn, like the kind of the basics of copywriting for this type of genre. Um, I think that that really helps to sell those things.
Yes, I
Mhm.
love that. I know the world right now is a little stressed out about AI. Do you have any kind of opinions? Just because a lot of people think like they can really fix a person in copywriting with AI, but I don't think you can. There's ways that you can manipulate it, but it
Mhm.
can replace a human person, I think.
I feel like I'm always the worst person to ask about AI because I'm not a huge user myself. Like, um, yeah, like I've seen fundraising appeals that people have obviously used AI to write. I've also seen ones where people have told me that I used AI to write this. I think that unless you're spending a lot of time programming and training that AI, which I don't think most people
Mhm.
are,
Yeah.
it really lacks something, like some
Yeah.
sort of like magic pizzazz, like whatever you wanna call it, that's often in those fundraising appeals that do really well.
Mhm.
Interestingly, like, I wanted to run a head-to-head test with, like, an email I've written versus one an AI was written kind of on the same topic, and I haven't done that yet, but I think it would be really interesting just to
See how they
have people, like, run more of those tests in, like, in fundraising specifically. The, like, nerd in me is like, "Oh, I wonder how that would do."
well, there's I do. Like I do
Mhm.
like a lot of exclamation marks
Mm.
and
Yeah.
sometimes dashes. And I know like AI does that a lot with writing. And so I've been trying to be mindful of it when I write just general emails because I'm like, no, I swear it's me talking.
Interestingly, my husband sent me an article, I think it was like last week or the week before,
Mhm.
that was written by a writer, or like of somebody who was a professional writer who was talking about the differences between like Chat GPT and Google's Gemini AI, which
Oh,
Gemini is actually was more built to be an editorial and writing feedback tool than Chat GPT is. And it was really interesting to see them kind of run through like the differences of like things that AI generated for them. And like
mm,
they'd ask like both AIs to like critique a piece of writing and like
so
the
interesting.
level and depth of critique that came back from like the Gemini AI was really sophisticated, like compared to like what they got from Chat
Mhm.
GPT. So it might also just be like sometimes a question of like, are you using the right tool, which is
Yep.
often something we have to be
Yeah.
asking. Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah. I had to do a presentation actually on SOPs because I talk about it so much. So I was asked to
Mhm.
do an SOP training for just it was like a marketing group that we always get it together. And I literally
Mhm.
just use oh my goodness. It's a chatbot that creates presentations for you.
Mm, cool.
I just did a brain dump of all the different slides that I wanted and I was like, go with it. And like obviously I do some tweaking because it's a bot. But
Mhm.
like I save probably at least an hour versus creating a PowerPoint that I know, and I'm a perfectionist too. So having like the right fonts and all the things, I'm like, oh, this is magical. I just need to present it now. So it just
Mhm.
some time a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I call my chatbot Ted if I use it.
That's great.
Use it. You brought up your husband. I know you also work with your husband owning a business. How more about that?
Yeah, Matt and I, well, I was a sole proprietor before for a couple years before we incorporated together. We incorporated, I think, about a year after we got married. We both, and to be fair, like we both work in the nonprofit sector. We do different things, but for a variety of reasons, we thought we would just kind of like consolidate resources under one corporate umbrella. And I think around that time, like I lost track of the number of people who told me it was a horrible idea, that they'd hoped I had a prenup and that it was terrible
Oh,
to tie up my business and intellectual property with Matt's. 10, we're about to celebrate 10 years of being married. So it doesn't feel like a
congrats.
bad decision. Yeah, I really like it. To be fair, we don't work together on projects. Like I think in the last 10 years, I probably could count on one hand the number of clients we've shared at the same time. So we've never really had to come together and be like, okay, like what's the project plan? How are we going to like run this process for people? That said, Matt is sort of my pro bono copy editor. He is a really brilliant writer in and of himself. And I think as like a creative partner for me as a copywriter, I love being able to draft things and have somebody who I really respect in their skill and their level of creativity in writing be able to look at something and critique it for me. Like I feel like even in the last 5 years, like his critiques and challenges of my writing have made me a significantly better writer. And I feel really grateful for that. To like have that kind of partnership in the business has been really nice. I also think though, separately from that, it's really nice to just not feel like 100% of the burden and responsibility of the business is on me. Like we kind of share it equally. Like we both are making money, we both have clients, we both have expenses, all those things, but we both we pay ourselves the same salary every month. And so we split those things equitably. And it feels good to do that, to not be like, oh, like I have to do 100% of this every single month.
Yeah.
There's something nice in the shared responsibility of that as like a project that we have in our life.
I love that. And it's funny that you were saying like the prenup and all. I feel like it's just sometimes it's one thing that everyone is like their first thing that kind of comes to mind sometimes when they're going into business on the scale, I guess.
Mhm.
But like for me, like my husband and I don't like work together in my business. I own my business, but I call him my assistant and he jokes like, am I getting paid for this? I'm like, no, you're pro bono. Well, or when we go to our accountant, like I always bring Mark.
Mhm.
He's like the financial guy and he helps me understand things on the financial end a little bit better.
Mhm.
Like I'm really good, but sometimes I just need it broken down a little bit further and then I'm like, got it.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Well,
just having that.
it's like interesting you say that too, because I think for me, one of the challenges I had before Matt and I started kind of like co-running a business together was that, sometimes like being a sole practitioner, like it's kind of like as much as I am an introvert, like it can be kind of lonely and isolating, or you're like, I don't necessarily have like a colleague down the hall I can talk to about like this thing that I'm working on and get feedback on it.
Mhm.
I don't have other people who are helping to like carry the load of this project.
Yes.
I think that's a reality like a lot of business owners and sole practitioners face in their work, or even freelancers. And, I think this has been like a nice way for both of us to feel like we still have a lot of independence from each
Mhm.
other in our work, but also like we can like come together when we want to like work on things and support each other.
Yeah, I love that. My
Mhm.
husband's because I say, like, "What about X, Y, and Z?" And he's like, "I have no idea what you said, but yes." I'm like, "Okay, I'll workshop it in my brain." So
Mhm.
that's why sometimes it's good to have, like, a work friend bestie, and Matt's your work friend bestie too on the other side too. So having
Mhm.
those kind of collaborations, I think, helps you like you said, like, owning a business can be a lonely journey if you're just your sole person and having somebody to kind of chat to about those kind of things, I think is amazing. Um,
Mhm.
how do you balance knowing like the business side and the personal side? Like when you're doing dinner, say, it's just like an off topic, like
I mean, fortunately, we have a 5-year-old who,
yeah,
like, 30 seconds into any business conversation will be like, "This is boring." Tell us she wants
so
to talk about something else. Um, I mean, I think for the most part, we're both pretty good at having, like, boundaries with work. I think for me, like, a lot of times I do after school pickup of our daughter. When I step away to like go get my bike helmet and bike to the school to grab her, like
mhm,
I'm kind of done with my work for the day. Like I make it a point not to have notifications on my phone ever. So I don't check my email usually like after 3 or 4
yeah,
in the afternoon. And I think it's been good for me to just kind of create some distance in my life
mm,
around work, because like I do work from home and
yeah,
Matt and I work together, and like a lot of those things can like kind of become a bit of a like mixed bag, if you kind of let them be that. I think we definitely have times though where after hours, we'll talk about something that we're working on. There was a particularly like challenging client situation I had this time last year
mhm,
where, Matt and I would talk about it after our daughter was in bed. And part of that was just like me trying to like emotionally process some of the stuff that I was dealing with this client.
yeah,
And, it was nice to be able to have somebody to talk to me, like to talk through those situations and to
mm,
help me realize like what it was I wanted to do in that contract and feel supported and affirmed like in that decision, rather than questioning myself or feeling really bad that I was going to end a contract because it was going so terribly. Like
yeah,
all of those things. Yeah, just to have somebody who is like unequivocally in my corner all the time is really reassuring. But yeah, I think for both of us, it is a balance. And I think we just have seasons where sometimes we have more to talk about with work, and other times, like, to be honest, like, work is boring, but in a good way. Like, there's like nothing bad going on. Like,
Yeah.
it's just sort of steady and it's going, and like there's nothing really to talk about there. And like, that's fine.
Yes. Yeah. It's all the
Mhm.
balance and having those
Yeah.
boundaries is so important. I think the last few years, I've pushed myself with boundaries of not working on weekends, like really
Mm.
had to like step into that. And also
Yeah.
there's one particular person I'd work with, and they always wanted to meet on like holidays. And
Mm.
I didn't I literally worked in the tourism hospitality business before all this. And the one thing I knew is that I didn't want to work anymore in the hospitality end because I didn't want to work on holidays. And then here I
Mm.
am going against the boundaries that I wanted to set for myself, falling into that kind of queue again. So
Mhm.
I really had to like mentally like break down more boundaries for myself. And like every now and then, sure, I'll work on weekends if I've had to because it's just was a
Yeah.
chaos week because of the kids or whichever. I give myself that opportunity of like, okay, it's okay to, but being
Mhm.
mindful of like making sure like those certain areas are not dealt with then. We're already midway through the show, by the way.
Wow, this goes fast.
I
Yeah,
told you.
I just to respond to what you said too, like, I think for me, like, one of my personal markers of, like, success of, like, things are or, like, maybe even just, like, markers of, like, things are going well in business is that, like, I can feel like I can check out, late afternoon, and
Mm,
I don't have to do anything until the next morning, and feel like it's, like, okay to let myself off the hook and to, like,
mhm,
rest and have time with my family and have time to, like, do other things that I wanna do in my life.
yes.
I wasn't always that way. I think, like, definitely before my daughter was born in 2020, like, I would sometimes work in the evenings or the weekends, and that's partially because my business, I also treated it like a hobby, like, some I just really enjoyed it, and so I wanted more time to work on it, which was fine, like, that was the season of life that I was in. But I think these days, I think my relationship to the business is that, like, it's here to serve me, I'm not here to serve
Mhm.
it, and
I like that.
it feels very affirming to say, like, yeah, I'm only going to work 25 hours a week, which is usually what I do. And,
Mm,
like, it's fine that I only work 25 hours a week. Like, I don't have to work more than that if I don't want
mhm,
to. Like, am I making enough money to sustain our family? Like, do I have enough time to, like, sustain the clients and serve my clients really well? And if the answers to those are yes, then, like, there's
mm.
nothing more to say. Like, it's fine. It's fine to work less.
Yeah, I like that. I think we have like a work, what is it, hustle culture a lot,
Mhm.
especially in Canada, in the US. Like we definitely are very hustle culture-ish. In some other areas, um, like Italy, like they're very like, this is my time. I might be late, or I might
Mm.
not. Like I'm like, I wish I can think like that. I'm always like, I need to do 600 million things and always be like
Mhm.
add more clients. But like, um, I don't know if I told you, Vanessa, but I took a course called Trauma with Money
Mm.
last year, starting in September, and I finished it in February. And so now I'm a trauma with money coach practitioner. And the one thing that we talked about is like consumerism
Mm.
and the scarcity mindset. And it
Yeah.
actually made me like think more on the scarcity mindset for myself of like, why am I always like in the scarcity mode, like hit the ground running of where the next client's going to come from when I'm in a state of panic. Or
Mm.
so in December, I was like, nope, not doing it this year or this month. I'm taking this month off, like just serving current clients and being mindful of what we have and just be happy and be happy that we're all healthy to have Christmas together. And so then December rolled around and then January came and I was like, let's just do it for January. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, but that's how, like, these changes get made sometimes, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I think, like, when I was concussed in 2016 and then, like, taking maternity leave in 2020, like,
Yeah.
sometimes you're forced to make changes that become life clarifying or, like, in these cases, like, business clarifying, and that's good. And then
Mhm.
other times, like, you start things as small experiments and you're just like, "Oh, well, that was fine." Like, nobody got mad at me, like, nothing blew up, no fires occurred. Like, it's
Exactly.
fine that I do this thing, and I think that's really good for people to realize. Like, there's so much, I think, behind the scarcity mentality, whether it's like with money or with time, there's so much anxiety there that is the anxious mind telling us something is going to go wrong if
Mhm.
we ease up. Like, there's something there that we're responding to. And in response to that, we're like overperforming, over managing, overworking, like all of those things.
Mm.
And it's really not until we can like actually prove to ourselves through like taking the opposite action and not doing those things that our
Mhm.
brain finally feels like it can relax and be like,
Mhm.
okay, nothing bad happened. Maybe it's okay.
100%. Like
Mm,
for me, I would say until Hudson came into the picture, my son, um,
mhm,
I was always just had like more, like I felt like I had to have all the hands in the pot a little bit.
mm,
And then when Huts came, I was like, I have to like take some kind of step back because I can't do it with two
mhm,
little ones. And what does that look like? And to be honest, I think that was like my saving grace in a way for me to
mm,
understand that I am a perfectionist. I don't like to micromanage by any means, but I'm just a perfectionist a little bit. And so how do
mhm,
I learn to let that go? And then who am I trying to be perfect for? It's just because at
mm.
the day,
What a good question. I like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and so I
Mhm,
realized I'm a people pleaser a lot.
mm,
So because I'm a people pleaser, that means that I need to show up and be a perfectionist. And this is kind of the stuff that we workshopped a bit in the trauma with money. But I didn't think for trauma with money, but it all shows up in different avenues than we can think of. Why we need to be a
mhm,
way and changing our mind and our nervous system too. Because I'm always in this state of fight mode. I think I've just
mm.
always
Yeah.
learned to be fight mode, either fight or fawn mode, depending, and it goes between the 2. And so I'm workshopping myself of like, what does these boundaries look like? What does like start asking my own self questions of like, how can
Mhm,
I put those things in the forefront? And like you mentioned, like things won't burn down, really. I think just because I think we're just all in the state of like scarcity, a state of chaos sometimes, like our brain just kind of goes into that scale.
sure.
But if we outline expectations with clients that I work Monday, no, let's say Monday to Thursday, and I don't um, answer my emails at 9 a.m. till 11. I just like that extra line of transparency with clients and or how you want to run your business. I think
Mhm.
will switch that mind to a little bit more at ease too.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's amazing how setting expectations can kind of change relationships. It's always really
Mm.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I would say too about that is that, you know, I think often like in addition to feeling like in fight or flight mode, we often feel very reactive. And I don't know about everybody listening, but like when I'm in a reactive place, it is my least creative place to be working from. It's also the least fun to be working from. And so I think these days, like I try really hard to set up my life and my business so that I'm not feeling so reactive about everything. And, inevitably, like there are things we have to react to. Like there's stuff that's not on the bingo card that comes out of left field. And like that's fine. We can be resilient to that. But we're more likely to be resilient to that when we're not like using all of our resources to be reactive over everything else all the time.
Mhm. Yes, 100%.
Mm. Mm.
I know you're a mom. Do you have any kind of tips to moms who maybe are just moms in business? Yeah. I know that's pretty broad,
Yeah.
but maybe just anything top of mind because I have so many directions I can go with this one.
Well, I think it might be like a bit of I mean, not that unique of a case, but I mean, I was in business for 7 years before my daughter was born. So I feel like I had a lot of time to be a business owner without kids and to be like a childless person for a while, which I think was like a good thing for me. Like I was in my 20s. It was a
Mm,
good time in my life. Um, I think though, transitioning to being a parent I did it certainly at like what was arguably like the most difficult time. My daughter was born in January of 2020, so like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And my
Yes.
husband and I live in Canada, and we don't have any family who lives in Canada. So during the pandemic, we were like really on our own to like figure out parenting and childcare and
Mhm.
everything. I think probably one of the toughest seasons of my business was that first 18 months of her life when we didn't have any childcare. And then when we got childcare when she was, I think, about 19 months old, it was like life changing. Before that, like that year and a half before, it was really tough for my husband and I because we were both piecemealing our schedule together. And then like when we weren't working, like we were parenting a really small person, which is really, I think as anybody knows, like that's taxing and hard. And so both of us, I think, just felt like very energetically drained from just like constantly going from like sometimes two really hard things,
Mhm.
depending on the day and the circumstances and work and parenting. Um, I think the thing that I would say that I've come to appreciate like 5 years into parenting is that there's obviously like seasons of life and like seasons the kids go through. And I think that as I'm mindful of that, of like where my daughter is and what's going on with her, if it's like a hard parenting season or a hard like developmental season for her, I try to, if I can, make work not as hard so that I'm not taxed out on all fronts.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect at that by any means, but it is something I try to think about because if I'm not, pouring from an empty cup, so to speak,
Mhm.
I feel like I can be a more present and better parent for her.
Mhm.
I also think too, like the blessing, the gift of parenting too has in some ways been that I feel motivated to work less because I just want to spend time with her. Like she's in school now. And so, like I love to hang out with her after school and on the weekends. And like I would rather just like leave my phone somewhere else just to be able to like hang out with her and have quality time together. And but like that's like where I'm at in life right now. I think I'm really glad to be the kind of example I am to her in her life. She tells people right now that she's planning on opening up a bakery with me, which
Aw.
is like a very curious and interesting choice because that's obviously not what I do. She made me a whole book the other day about the bakery she and I are going to open. And I
Aw,
said to her, in 10 years, if this is still interesting to you, like we can revisit this.
that's so
Like, but I'm glad that I can like foster that sense of like creativity and imagination in her in some ways around like
Mhm.
work, even at a young age. Like
Yeah.
it's wonderful to me that like she thinks about that and like also that she's like
Oh,
interested in doing something with me is also
I
very
love
heartwarming.
aw, I love that. My daughter, it must have been 2 years, so age 4-ish, 4.5, like,
Mhm.
she asked Santa to buy her a desk because she wanted to be a boss. Like, mommy I was like, luckily, does she not know I use the desk every day now. Like,
My husband and I think one of our like favorite memories of her when she was about like 2.5. So like it was like early in her life, like still kind of like pandemic-ish years in like
mhm,
2022. She would sometimes sit at our kitchen table and
yeah,
pretend to be on work calls as my husband. And
that's so
she would like be like, I'm on a call now. And then she would just be silent, and then she would just, like, fake laugh, and then she would just, like,
that's so
say
cute.
things that she would hear him saying from time to time. It's just like
That's
I don't
so
know.
cute.
Kids are great for the comic relief, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute. I love that.
Yeah.
They keep it interesting, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely. But I'm not sure I really answered your question just in terms of, like, tips around being, like, a mom and starting a business or having a business.
Mhm.
I think for me, like, boundaries with myself are probably,
Mhm.
like, the number one thing that I think about and or things that I would suggest to other people is, boundaries with your time, with clients,
Mhm.
like, if you wanna be working all the time, sure, like, why not? Like, if you have the ability to do that and you want to, that's a personal choice and totally valid one. But if you wanna spend time with your kids, like, figure out how to have those boundaries and, like, tell people when you are and aren't working and make it happen.
Yeah. I actually had a
Mhm.
conversation with somebody who's just wanting to start their business. They're a mom of 3, and the
Mhm.
one thing she was like, "How do you do it all? Like, time management, like, what's on your website? You're doing all these things." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's the thing that like just in social media, like it doesn't matter what it looks like. You never know
Mhm.
behind the scenes of what somebody's actually doing. And some days I'm just holding on for life over here. Like, hold
Yeah, 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 I think that's very true, and, also, like, I'd be the first to admit, like, I don't do everything, like,
on.
ever. Like, I have a very focused, like, simple business model for a reason, like, I don't wanna be doing a lot of things, and, in the last year, like, I, for instance, like, took a big step back from content marketing, like, it's just not
Mhm.
something that had the return on investment for my business these days, and I didn't wanna spend time that I could be using on something else, and I also didn't feel the need to, like, make work for myself.
Mhm.
And I feel that way too about, like, household management, life management, where it's like, I don't know, some of it's urgent and, like, there's deadlines obviously associated with stuff, and, like, I take care of all of those things. But, like, doing less and changing my standards in a way that is reasonable and realistic for me also means that I can, like, free myself of some of the guilt of that, which is the hardest thing to deal with if you
Yeah.
feel like you have to do it all.
Yeah. And I said to this particular
Mhm,
person too about time management because I
mhm.
was given, I thought and still think is bad advice. Uh, wake up at 5 a.m. because there's a book about it that the most successful people wake up at 5 a.m. And I think that's just a little bit w- they don't have parent they're not a parent. It's one, but
Yeah, I think that's a super common critique of, like, modern productivity advice, is that a lot of these people are men who don't shoulder the burden of, like, household parenting responsibilities, and it lacks kind of the gendered element of it, which I think is
yeah,
really important.
100%. And
Yeah,
so
I mean
'cause she asked my opinion on that, and I said,
mhm,
"Well, really, you need to learn and map in a way that works for you and your family." And it's not gonna
yeah,
look perfect. So one day
that's
you
true.
might be like, let's just use me as example because my one kid's been home almost all of March, why no one has really seen me live on the radio show. Um, you just never know what life's gonna give you, and
Yeah.
of it, with small kids and kids.
Mhm,
So sometimes you just kind of have to play it by ear day by day. And right now we're in the cold and flu season like no other. And really, I've just learned to try to give myself more grace. I had
mhm,
time my days as much as I can, like my top to do things. Maybe it's only three and not over like exert myself. And then if I can't get to it, just remind myself that I did the best I can and give myself grace. And that's the biggest thing I
mhm,
keep repeating myself to the listeners that do show up every week and listen to me is to give yourself
mhm,
grace because I think we individuals, moms, business owners are so hard on ourselves, but we tend to forget to give ourselves grace and that extra
mhm.
piece that we sometimes need.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah. I wanted to because we have about 10 more minutes ish. I want to give opportunity to talk about your book.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us more?
Um Yeah, yeah, I should have brought a copy with me. I have so many here. Um,
No.
yeah, I wrote the book, and it's called The Storytelling Nonprofit: A Practical Guide to Raising Money and Awareness back
Mhm.
in 2016, so it's a few years old now. But I really wanted to create a guide for nonprofits to be able to get good results from fundraising appeals that use stories without huge consulting price tags. Definitely, there's lots of people out there who charge nonprofits lots of money to do this kind of work, and not every nonprofit has the budget for that. And I have always liked the idea of democratizing information and making it more available to more people so that they can find their own version of success. And in this case, like organizations can find their own version of success. And so I wrote the book to be kind of like a portable consultant of like kind of the step by step, like, here's what you need to do. It's very much like a book and a workbook in one. There's a lot of worksheets in there that really guide organizations through some of the storytelling concepts of, what kind of stories do you want to tell? How do you align those with messages and values that are important for your audience? And how do you then use those things to raise money in appeals that you might send to them?
Mhm. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Can they get your book on the website that I have just here
Yeah,
or
it's also available on Amazon as well.
Amazon?
Mhm.
So anyone that is not seeing what we're doing, it is www.thestorytellingnonprofit, all one word.com. Write that down and I'll put it in the chat here actually for everyone. I'll multitask for a minute. I love that though, because I feel like non-for-profits, like we mentioned, like sometimes they don't have the funds to get to the next needle, or kind of somebody could not even know what direction. They're just starting out and they decide to start a non-for-profit because it's such a great idea. So I love that you have this book. Just putting it in
Thanks.
the
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was something I'd wanted to do for a few years. I just to be transparent, self-publish, and it was a great decision for me. I'm really glad that I did that.
Mhm.
I there's so many things now where I'm like, "Oh, I should definitely publish a second edition of this at some
Mhm.
point or write another book." But all the projects and clients and everything. Um, it was a good exercise for me professionally for a number of reasons. At the time, I was doing a lot of speaking engagements, and having a book was an incredible marketing tool to get more speaking engagements. And so, if there's anybody who's listening and you're interested in getting into like the speaking and training space where you want to do keynotes or speak with associations or groups, things like that, having a book is a great foot in the door. It is a
Mhm.
really good tool for that. And so it can definitely be part of the business strategy for that. Like I would just encourage you to think about more well-known public speakers. Like so often they have books,
It's
right?
true.
Like there's a reason for that. Like the book is their presentation, like the things that they often want to be known for, the things they want to talk about. So it can be a really great part of a business strategy if that's something you want to be doing.
I love that. I feel like a lot more people are talking about it now. But
Mhm.
it's like podcasting, but now I've seen a lot more people wanting to write books. I don't know if it's just I've come across a lot more people that want to write books, or
Mm.
I'm not sure, but it just seems like everybody's telling me that they're in the process of writing. Did you
Yeah, I
use
mean,
Amazon?
I I'm sorry?
Did you use Amazon to write your book,
I
or
did.
yeah.
Yeah, I self-published through Amazon's publishing imprint,
Nice.
their print-on-demand service. Yeah, and I think at the time, like, that was just, like, the easiest thing for me to do, to be able to print on
Mhm.
demand and get books mailed to people, and I think it was, like, a good option at the time. I'm not sure if I would use that again now, but like, in terms of ease to getting a book out in people's hands, it's a good option.
Mhm. Um, Actually, I'm gonna have somebody come on the show in a few. I can't remember my schedule
Mhm,
for who's coming when, but in a few weeks, months from now,
mhm,
she assists people to writing books, and she gets you in touch with publishers and or guides you on the journey for Amazon. Um,
mm,
so I've dug a little deep into it just so I can learn myself. And Amazon
mhm.
seems like a nice way to go if you don't want to pay like the publication fee, like the royalties. That's the word that I'm thinking of. Royalties.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you don't wanna split the royalties with a publisher or negotiate
Mhm.
that, that's true. I mean, Amazon still does take a cut
Yeah.
of whatever your price is for books, and I think it depends too on, like, what type of book you're publishing. Like, I think since I'm more in the nonfiction space of books, there's one less competition, like, especially in, like, the niche that I write in.
Mhm.
But, like, for instance, I've seen like, I'm an avid fiction reader, and I read a lot of romance, and I know a lot of, like, independent indie authors have lamented over the years the changes in Kindle Unlimited, for instance, which is on Amazon, that, like, they're getting, like, pennies per read basically at this point.
Yeah.
So I think it depends, like, what type of books you're publishing and where you wanna publish and what your goals are for it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Well, you'll have to come back when you, because it sounds like you're gonna probably write in something else, another one. You'll have to come back and let us know what you do.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd love to.
Well, we're like 5 minutes out. Is there any last minute thoughts that maybe you want to share with everybody? Maybe, I know you do some speaking events, so or anything
Mm.
to kinda educate the listeners on how to reach you, and I'll put in the banners too, again, your website.
Yeah, probably the best place to find me is over on my website, thestorytellingnonprofit.com. I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn, but not a huge social media user on other platforms. Um, Yeah, and if you are somebody who works in the nonprofit space, I often am doing like free trainings and speaking engagements with other partners in the space. You can usually find a listing of those over on my website and in my newsletter.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show today, Vanessa. It was so lovely to have you, and we'll have you again
Yeah,
next year, hopefully, when
hopefully.
another book will be already out by then.
Hopefully, yeah.
Thank you to all our listeners to listening to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams, and a big thank you to United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Next week, we'll probably be shooting a rerun because it's Easter long weekend, but we'll be back in a few weeks' time. With that, everyone, remember your journey is unique and your worth is unquestionable. Thank you.